Hi, this is chapter 11, The Making of Bullies and Victims. Bullies have always been with us. We can all remember episodes of bullying from our childhoods, whether we were participants, victims, or witnesses. It's rare now to find a school district in North America that doesn't have an anti bullying program. But the sources of bullying are little understood. The measures to deal with bullying are designed to deal with the behavior and ignore the underlying cause. In 2001, after a deadly shooting at a school in California, State Senate passed legislation to crack down on the problem. It turns out that the school where the shooting occurred already had bullying programs, a way to provide anonymous tips about students making threats, and a program to help teenagers get along called Names Can Really Hurt Us. So despite them having like programs in place, this still happened. So we're trying, but the underlying cause isn't really getting treated with the programs. With bullying, as with the violence in general, we see the effects of peer orientation. We can actually observe the same phenomena in the animal world. So there was a laboratory in the US National Institute for Health with monkeys. They separated the group of infant monkeys from adults. And by default, because there was nobody else raising them anymore, they were raising each other. So they were getting peer oriented, basically. Um, a large number of these monkeys displayed bullying behavior and became impulsive, aggressive, and self destructive. Another example of seeing this in the animal world was in a South African wildlife reserve. A decade ago, they couldn't sustain the population of elephants anymore and killed some of the adults when they thought the young were old enough to survive on their own. Without fathers, they started to roam like gangs and began to do things that elephants don't usually do, like throwing sticks and water at rhinos. Some of them became especially violent and started killing rhinos. The solution was to bring in a large male to help them, and then the killing stopped. When we think of aggressive kids, we think of losers. We think that they're stigmatized and out of control. But about one third of these aggressive kids are ringleaders of groups with a lot of influence on their peers and the classroom as a whole. Even though they are in the minority, these kids have a lot of influence due to their high status. This might explain why, in a study from New York University, they found by watching 53 videos of schoolyard bullying, more than half the time the bystanders observed, that were observing the taunting and violence passively, while nearly a quarter of the time some of them joined in picking on the victim. So because those were kind of cool kids in the kids' eyes, they thought it was okay to not do anything about it or to join in. According to a study reported on the New York Times, youngsters who spent 30 hours a week away from parents had a 17% chance of becoming a bully versus a 6% chance of children who spent less than 10 hours away from their parents. So this can be in daycare or with somebody else, or with just each other. So just make sure that parents have to go to work, and that's fine, right? That's just the reality. Just make sure they're in a good daycare where they have a good connection, or with a grandparent, or with somebody who cares about them. I know that's hard, especially nowadays where there's such a shortage in daycares. It's really hard to find daycare at all, that sometimes people are just so glad they found anybody to take care of their kids. They just go with that. But we want to make sure as best we can that our kids are being treated well and loved and taken care of wherever they're going to be when they're away from us. So, why do peer attachments predispose children to becoming bullies or victims? Attachment happens in a hierarchy so that a nurturing adult can take care of an immature and needy young. In this scenario, the adult should be in the caretaking role and the child in the dependent role. The dominant submissive hierarchy can turn into a bully victim scenario. Sometimes alpha children take charge in a positive way in the absence of an adult. These children might be bossy, but they aren't bullies. They aren't mean, just fiercely protective. You might know someone like that, an older sibling or someone. Children or adults become bullies when the striving for dominance is not coupled with the instinctual sense of responsibility for those lower in the pecking order. Dominance does not elicit caretaking because the bully's flight from vulnerability is usually so desperate that he or she has become hardened against feelings of caring and responsibility. Bullies are, above all, psychologically shut down against an awareness of anything that would increase their sense of vulnerability. Bullies are blind to their shortcomings and mistakes. I don't care, and it's not my fault, are the mantras of the bully. You might know some adults who also don't take responsibility for their actions. That's also kind of a bullying and behavior, and a behavior to try to not be vulnerable. So for bullies, vulnerability is a virtue, to be tearless and fearless. So what drives a bully to dominate? A person who is in the dominant position feels far less vulnerable than a person in the dependent position. So the more a person is emotionally shut down, the more they will seek dominance over others. Some kids are psychologically set to become bullies before getting peer-oriented. Peer orientation, even if it's not the cause, will be an issue because it provides a lot of opportunities for the child to act out his impulses to bully. Sometimes the drive for dominance can be traced to a painful experience while the child was in a dependent role, when a parent or caregiver has abused their position of responsibility by lording over the child, by trampling on his or her dignity, or by hurting the child. It is not surprising that the child will want to avoid a dependent position at all costs. In any new attachment situation, he or she will automatically seek the dominant position. A child might also turn into a bully if the parents fail to give the child a secure feeling that the parent is in charge and able to take care of the child. The parent needs to be in the lead, not the child. So it's not just parents being aggressive and bullying their kids that can make their children want to be in the dominant role. It's also if you're not taking the lead, then the child feels like they have to take the lead. And then they're suddenly in the dominant role, and they might seek that out with their friends too then, or with you. So some parents hope to avoid upset and frustration by doing everything in their power to make things work for their children. These children are deprived of the experience of transforming frustration into feelings of futility, of letting go and adapting. So sometimes you kids will just have to accept that something's has to stop, or it's not okay, or they have to sit in the car seat whether they like it or not, or they can't have ice cream right now when they just woke up. As much as you want to keep your kids happy, it's not good to give in to everything they want, because they got to realize that there are some boundaries. Other people have boundaries, and they got to listen and they got to accept it. They got to learn that they're, to reach the tears of futility, like Gordon Neufeld says, to cry because you realize, okay, this is just not going to work out. And that's okay. It's okay to be sad about things not working out. And, as a good parent, you got to put boundaries in place for them too, even when it's hard. Other parents confuse respect for their children with indulging their wants instead of meeting their needs. So of course you got to indulge their wants sometimes and not just their needs, but just don't do it all the time. They don't need to have everything they want. So still others seek to empower their children by giving them choices and explanations when what the child really needs is to be allowed to express his frustration when coming up against something that just doesn't work. There's a time and place for choices, and explanations for sure. But when your child is really upset and screaming and crying, you're not going to get through to them with explanations or anything, or giving them choices at that point when they're already totally freaking out about something. Just take them in your arms, comfort them, make them feel loved, and help them to accept that, yeah, you know, this is just how it is now and it's sad, and help them cry and accept it. Um, and then he says, still others look to their children to fulfill their own attachment needs. So, of course, we all have attachment needs, but it's our job as parents to take care of our kids and not for our kids to take care of us, physically as well as emotionally. If you're sad and your child comforts you, if that happens very rarely, okay, that's all right. But, it's not really a child's job to take care of you, right? Like you got to be in the lead. You got to be the one in charge, the one to guide them, the one to comfort them. Many parents are present for their children physically, but are too preoccupied with the stress in their lives to be there emotionally. Um, so if you're super stressed, like I said before, and it's just a rough time right now, see if you can find somebody else to step into the role for you, to take your kids out sometimes, do something fun, connect with them, and then you connect with them when you can, the best you can. But get another adult to help you out, whether that's your husband or a friend or just somebody that you trust. If parents are too needy or too passive or too uncertain to assert their dominance, and when he says dominance, it doesn't mean like as the supreme commander. It means in the sense of taking charge and being in the lead. Then the attachment instincts are going to move the child in charge by default. Sometimes children then start to bully their parents. When they become peer oriented, they bully their peers. So if your child is bullying you, you got to turn that around and put yourself in charge again, in the lead, like in a solid way, not in a mean way, but you're in charge. You are the one taking care of them. Okay, then he says, how bullies seek dominance over others. The establishment of dominance can take many forms. The most direct way of elevating oneself is to boast or brag, presenting oneself as the biggest, the best, the most important. The most common way, however, is to put others down. The bully instinctively scans for the insecurities in others and seeks to exploit them. What bullies want is to satisfy their attachment hunger. Of the 6 ways to attach that we talked about in chapter 2, being the same as someone is the least vulnerable. The flip side of the coin, being different, becomes the target for the bully. Another of the less vulnerable ways of attachment is to be significant to someone. Bullies want to be the most superior, attacking any apparent inferiority in others. Bullies cannot stand anyone to be more important than they are. Another way to achieve dominance is to intimidate. By provoking fear, the bully gains the upper hand. At the same time, they go to extremes to show their own lack of fear. You can't talk sense into such children because our sense does not make sense to them. One of the most primitive ways to gain dominance is to gain physical superiority. There used to be a difference in behavior by gender. Peer orientation has made some girls just as physically aggressive. Some people interpret this as girls being less prim and proper, as an expression of girl power. This is far from the case. Girls bullying each other is a sign of emotional regression, not liberation. Same for boys, of course. My kids were on a hockey team when they were younger, my 2 older boys, and they played against a girl team one time, and the girls were very aggressive, and the parents and the coaches were laughing and cheering them on and thought it was hilarious that they were beating on the boys. The girls were way bigger, so it was a team of, mixed ages for the girls. And some of the girls are much bigger than boys at that age anyway. And the boys were just getting clobbered. And I don't know why this was funny to people. I think for that reason, like he's saying that people think, oh, girl power, yeah, yeah, beat up the boys. That's not funny. It's not any more funny, girls beating up boys, as it is the other way around. My boys came off the ice crying, not because they were hurt, but because they were like hurt physically. They were hurt emotionally, that people thought this was hilarious somehow to beat on the boys, and the um, referee wasn't being fair, and it was just ridiculous. So if your girl is beating up a boy, don't encourage it, please, because little boys they're just as precious as little girls, and let's not encourage anybody beating up anybody. Alrighty, then he says, what makes bullies so demanding? They can never demand what they truly need. What they truly need is love, warmth, and relationship, just like all of us. Therefore, no matter what bullies receive in response to their demands, and no matter how fully their demands are met, it can never satisfy their hunger for emotional nourishment, and the bully's frustration grows. So what triggers a bully's attack? A bully can be provoked to attack whatever he demands, even if the demands are met. Bullies expect deference. Even looking at a bully the wrong way can trigger them to attack. Peer-oriented children who are numb to vulnerability often have trouble reading cues and avoiding bullies or dangerous situations. So a show of vulnerability is another trigger for a bully. If they know your weakness, they will exploit them. So a lot of children don't show empathy with the bully's victim because they're afraid of showing any sign of caring. Sometimes children become submissive to the bully, just like in the hierarchy of wolves, when the dog lies or a wolf lies, exposing their belly or their throat to show, oh, don't hurt me. If you do that to a bully, like you show them vulnerability, the more likely outcome is that they will hurt you. So it doesn't work very well. It can be scary for kids. Another thing Gordon Neufeld says is that bullies back into attachment. He says emotionally healthy people approach attachment in a straightforward way. For a peer-oriented bully, that would be much too scary. A bully can't admit to their hunger for connection. Often they can't even feel it consciously. The bully will ignore and shame people in the presence of the person they would really like to be close to, distancing one person to get closer to another. There is risk in loving, but not in loathing. The bully's victims often wonder why they were picked on when they were just minding their own business. It's rarely about them. It's hard for them to not take it personally. We need to make sure we shield them with a strong adult attachment. It's important to remember that children don't want to be bullies. Bullies aren't bad eggs, but rather eggs with hard shells that parents and teachers have been unable to hatch into separate beings. The bully's only hope is to attach to an adult who will nurture the bully's emotional needs. Under the tough interior is a deeply wounded and profoundly alone young person. A school counselor asked a bully, "How does it feel to have everyone in the school scared of you?" And the bully said, "I have many friends, but really I don't have any." In Lord of the Rings, after Gollum attaches to Frodo, he says to his distrustful, manipulative, and even murderous other self, "We don't need you anymore." Most approaches to bullying don't work because people think it's a behavior problem, using sanctions and consequences. Not only do the negative consequences fail to sink in, they fuel the frustration and alienate the bully even more. We need to see bullying as an attachment disorder. Similarly, the best way to help the victim is for them to be able to depend on a caring adult who is responsible for them and can help them find their tears about what isn't working for them. So both the bully and the victim need the adult to help them find their their soft feelings and feel like they're loved and taken care of and supported. And if your child comes home after being bullied and is crying and is telling you all about it, that's a really good sign. That means they totally trust you. They know they can tell you everything that's going on. They can lean on you. They know you're there for them. And a child who opens up and talks to you that you have access to, they will not like in turn hurt somebody else or hurt themselves. So it's important your kids have their tears. So never like mock your child if they're soft hearted. You know, sometimes I hear it with boys, you know, don't be a sissy, that kind of thing. We need our kids to have a soft heart. It's really, really important to feel our feelings so that they don't turn into bullies or they don't shut us out and you know, keep us close so that we have access and we can guide them. Alrighty, that was a long one. Thanks for hanging in there and listening.